living in an exciting era, in an interconnected world
that's dynamic and ever-changing. Customs, industries, and practices that have thrived for decades are being revolutionized by technology and innovation. But these changes are producing an ever more unpredictable future for many. The careers of today are unlikely to exist in the future, and many will lose their current way of earning a living. The World Economic Forum estimates that 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up working in jobs that don't yet exist. The OECD projects that because of automation and globalization, high technology, science, and knowledge-based jobs are expected to increase at the expense of manufacturing and manual jobs. To navigate this economy and to achieve inclusive prosperity, post-secondary education will essentially become a requirement. Unfortunately, a rising problem in Canada is the cost of post-secondary education. As it almost certainly is for many of us here, this is a personal issue for me. By the time I graduate from law school, I'll have tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. So tonight, I'll discuss the problem of student debt in Canada, its implications for Canadians, and my solution to solve it, a cooperative, debt-free model to fund post-secondary education. Although post-secondary education is becoming almost essential for success, it by no means guarantees anything. In 2014, un- or underemployment among young Canadians was 28%. They enter a workforce dominated by precarious contract and temporary employment instead of secure permanent jobs. Compared to 1978, the full-time employment rate for Canadians aged 17 to 24 has decreased nearly 20%. Even among employed post-secondary graduates, 23% are not working in their field of study. While employment prospects are weakening, public funding for post-secondary education has decreased significantly. Today, public funding accounts for approximately half of an education institution's operating budget, down from more than 90% in the 1970s. This has created a funding gap, one that has largely been filled by tuition fees. Since 1990, inflation-adjusted tuition costs have increased nearly 300%, leading students to rely on loans and therefore pushing student debt to historic levels. Currently, the average Canadian student graduates with nearly $28,000 in debt, and this will only increase. The federal government predicts that the tuition rate will rise at a rate of 2.5% above inflation annually over the next 25 years. And a student born in 2011 can expect to pay more than $100,000 for their total post-secondary education cost. The combined effect of rising student debt and lack of employment is drastic. It increases income inequality. Statistics Canada found that among those in their 20s, student loan borrowers had significantly less net worth and assets than non-borrowers. The average net worth of a borrower was $17,500 compared to $62,000 for non-borrowers. Instead of buying a house, a car, investing, or starting a business, borrowers use their incomes to pay back loans with interest, while the non-borrowers generate wealth. Since student loan borrowers also lack disposable incomes, they don't fully participate in the economy, thereby reducing economic growth. Student debt also keeps certain groups out of the education system altogether. Debt aversion is strong among those who do not pursue post-secondary education. This is especially the case in racialized communities, low-income families, and single-parent households. Student debt also affects career choices. The pressure to repay prevents many from pursuing valuable opportunities such as unpaid internships. Debt also creates asymmetries in the labor force. For example, high student debt levels among medical students are driving young doctors to abandon family practice in favor of higher-paying specialist positions. It also forces graduates to accept jobs at unfair conditions, leading to a race to the bottom and deterioration of wages and labor standards. It also has other far-reaching indirect effects. For example, student loan borrowers are more likely to report poor mental health. These facts prove three things. One, post-secondary education will continue to become more critical for meaningful participation in the economy. Two, it does not, however, guarantee anything. And three, at this rate, student debt will continue to rapidly rise and have a corrosive effect on all of Canada. It's clear that we must address the burden of student debt. My solution to fix this problem is to fund higher education through a cooperative model. Under my proposal, students in need would sign a contract for funds with a government agency. In return, they'll agree to pay back a portion of their earnings that they make each year after graduation for a defined period of time until the entire education cost for the graduating class has been paid back. This payback amount would depend on their incomes relative to the rest of their peers and would only come from those earnings that are above median income. Like a progressive taxation scheme, the contribution would increase as income increased. This system would essentially eliminate student debt. It's also highly equitable since those who become wealthy from the education system will end up paying for the education system. And financial relief provided by it will end up benefiting those who end up needing it the most, i.e. those who make below median incomes. The key to this proposal is that it's outcome-based. Currently, students take a huge risk when choosing a career path, as they'll be burdened by crushing debt if the path isn't economically fruitful or if it doesn't suit them. But under this proposed model, the cost would wholly depend on career outcomes. The cost of the individual would correctly mirror the actual monetary value of the education. It also automatically adjusts for a changing landscape, as repayment is dependent on the distribution of wealth over people's careers, and payments will vary with changes in the job market. This is especially important in a volatile, technology-driven environment that leads to concentration of wealth. Another benefit of this proposal is that it will be self-reliant after an initial investment. It would also eliminate the current inefficient process for providing financial aid through multiple decentralized pathways. It would also not affect those who can already pay for their education, thus maximizing choice without sacrificing equality of opportunity. In conclusion, the rising cost of higher education is an ongoing crisis that will only intensify over the next decade. We must find solutions to make post-secondary education debt-free for everyone to prosper. The proposed outcome-based cooperative solution would create an equitable system that correctly values the economic worth of education without burdening the next generation of Canadians. Thank you for being here and listening to this talk.